The alien queen couldn't comprehend the human. She married, revealed his true power, the human, whose name was David, lived a life that appeared ordinary to anyone who looked at him. He worked in a small library in his hometown, surrounded by the quiet rustle of pages and the faint scent of old books. He had always been drawn to stories of faraway lands, strange creatures, and mysteries that went beyond the limits of his small town. David had a kind heart, and people often noticed it in small ways. How he helped a lost child find their parent, or how he stayed late at work to help organize the library shelves. But despite his simple life, he possessed a calm confidence that seemed to quietly radiate from him. There was a strength in him that no one could explain, not even David himself. Far beyond Earth, in a galaxy with colors and lights humans could not imagine, lived the alien queen. Her name, in her own language, was unpronounceable to human ears, so she accepted the simple translation given to her by her advisors. She ruled her people with intelligence, precision, and authority. She was used to being in control of everything around her. Every decision she made was calculated, and every outcome carefully measured. Yet, despite her power and brilliance, there was something about humans that confused her. Their emotions were unpredictable, their decisions often illogical, and their kindness sometimes reckless. She could not understand why anyone would act without calculation, and yet she was drawn to them, intrigued by the strange depth in their simplicity. The first time David and the Queen met was entirely by accident, though neither would ever forget the moment. David had been selected, along with a few others from Earth, to attend a peaceful interstellar delegation. The humans had no idea what awaited them, only that they would meet leaders from other worlds. David, with his quiet curiosity, accepted the invitation without hesitation. He had always believed that learning about the unknown was the most important journey a person could take. The spaceship that took them to the Queen's world was unlike anything David had ever seen. The walls shimmered with light that changed with every step, and the air seemed to hum softly with energy. Yet, David's calm nature allowed him to move through the new environment with ease, observing quietly, listening carefully, and asking thoughtful questions. The Queen observed him from a distance at first. She had met many humans, but few left a mark on her consciousness. David, however, was different. While others were nervous or awed by her presence, David remained calm and respectful. He looked at her not with fear or desperation, but with curiosity and a gentle interest. This alone piqued her attention. She had expected humans to be either aggressive or weak, but David seemed neither. His eyes held a quiet depth, and his small smiles hinted at understanding without needing explanation. For the Queen, who was used to control and knowledge, this was confusing. How could someone so ordinary possess such a calm, unwavering presence in the face of the unknown? As the delegation began, David found himself in many meetings and conversations, where leaders from other worlds discussed alliances, trade, and knowledge sharing. The Queen's presence dominated every room, and yet David noticed small things that others missed. He noticed the subtle tension in her posture when a question made her pause. He noticed the quick flashes of curiosity in her eyes when she heard an unexpected idea. While others fawned or argued, David simply listened and responded thoughtfully. His words were simple, but they carried a weight that surprised everyone in the room, including the Queen. She could not understand why his simple sentences caused ripples of reflection among her advisors. The days passed, and the Queen found herself increasingly intrigued by David. She began to observe him more closely, sometimes from across the room, sometimes through the subtle use of her advanced sensors. David never noticed, yet his natural behavior fascinated her. He treated everyone with fairness, even those who appeared insignificant. He laughed easily at small jokes, comforted those who were afraid, and offered help without expectation. It was a kind of power the Queen had never encountered, one that did not require dominance, technology, or threat. She began to see that this human strength was something she could not measure or control. One evening, after a long day of meetings, David wandered to a quiet garden within the Queen's palace. The garden was unlike anything on Earth, filled with glowing plants that pulsed softly in the night, and streams of water that shimmered with strange colors. David walked slowly, absorbing the beauty, feeling both humbled and amazed. The Queen, curious as always, decided to approach him, though she remained hidden at first. She wanted to observe him without disturbing the natural flow of his behavior. She watched as he reached out to touch a plant, his fingers brushing lightly against its glowing petals. He smiled, whispering words of admiration, though the words themselves were meaningless to her species. It was the emotion behind them that caught her attention. She could sense the genuine wonder, the pure appreciation, and it baffled her. Eventually, David felt a presence nearby. He turned, expecting to see another visitor, and was met with the Queen's gaze for the first time in person. Her appearance was unlike anything he had ever imagined. She was tall, elegant, and her form shimmered with a beauty that was both alien and majestic. Most humans would have been terrified or overwhelmed, but David simply bowed slightly, as he would when greeting anyone of importance. His calm respect surprised the Queen. She expected fear, awe, or at least hesitation, but not this quiet, unshakable composure. She found herself at a loss, unsure how to react. Her usual methods of assessing strength, through power displays or verbal challenges, failed against this human. They spoke quietly, their conversation a mixture of curiosity and cautious understanding. The Queen asked questions about Earth, about David's life, about why humans acted the way they did. David answered honestly, with no attempt to impress or deceive. He spoke of simple joys, small failures, lessons learned, and the beauty of ordinary life. His words were straightforward, yet they carried a depth the Queen could not compute. She tried to analyze his logic, his reasoning, but it eluded her. She was accustomed to leaders who could be measured by knowledge or skill, but David's strength was invisible to the usual tools of judgment. As days turned into weeks, their interactions grew more frequent. The Queen found herself drawn to David not just as a subject of curiosity, but as a companion. She sought his opinions, watched his reactions, and even began to question some of her own assumptions about humans. David, in turn, approached her not with fear but with openness. He asked questions about her world, her responsibilities, and the challenges she faced as a leader. He listened attentively when she spoke of difficult decisions, offering insights that were simple yet profound. He never tried to dominate or manipulate. He simply observed, understood, and responded with honesty. Despite the differences between them, a bond began to form, a bond built not on power or control, but on mutual respect and genuine curiosity. The Queen realized that this human possessed a kind of strength that could not be measured by technology or authority. He had the ability to inspire trust, to calm fear, and to act with courage in situations where others might falter. She began to see that the human mind and heart were capable of a form of power that transcended her understanding. The Queen also noticed subtle ways in which David influenced others. Her advisors, who were used to following strict protocols, began to respond differently when he spoke. They hesitated less, considered new ideas, and even smiled more often in his presence. David's calm demeanor and quiet confidence created a ripple effect, changing the atmosphere wherever he went. The Queen could not understand why a single human could have such an impact, yet she could not deny it. One night, as they both stood looking out over the alien landscape from the palace balcony, the Queen finally admitted to herself that she could not comprehend this human. She had expected to assess, measure, and understand him quickly, but he defied all expectations. There was something unique about his presence, something that made her question everything she thought she knew about strength, leadership, and the nature of life itself. David, unaware of the depth of her contemplation, smiled at the beauty of the twin moons reflecting on the shimmering lakes below. He spoke softly about hope, kindness, and the importance of small actions. His words, though simple, resonated deeply within her, stirring emotions she had never experienced before. In that moment, the Queen realized that she had encountered a human unlike any other. He was ordinary in appearance, yet extraordinary in essence. He had a power that could not be measured by technology, rank, or intellect, a power rooted in heart, courage, and understanding. She could not explain it, and she could not predict it. And though she was a queen, accustomed to control and certainty, she felt something unfamiliar, awe and admiration for this human who walked calmly beside the unknown, unafraid and unassuming, yet capable of changing everything around him. From that night onward, the Queen's perception of humans began to shift. David was no longer a subject to observe or a curiosity to study. He was someone she respected, someone whose presence challenged her understanding and expanded her worldview. She did not yet know the full extent of his abilities, but she sensed that they were greater than anything she had imagined. And for David, who had only ever sought to learn and understand, the alien world no longer felt overwhelming. He had found someone who, despite her incomprehension, was beginning to understand him in ways that mattered. Days turned into weeks, and David continued to navigate life in the alien world with a mix of curiosity and calm confidence. Every morning he would walk through the palace halls, greeting workers, advisors, and other visitors with the same quiet respect that had first impressed the queen. Though the alien environment was vast and unfamiliar, David never seemed lost. Instead, he observed everything around him: the way the light bounced off the shimmering floors, the subtle hum of the palace energy systems, and the way the queen's people moved with precision and purpose. He asked questions, listened attentively, and offered small suggestions when appropriate, never attempting to assert control, only to understand. The queen, meanwhile, could not stop thinking about him. She observed from her chambers and during meetings, sometimes openly, sometimes from behind the walls of her impressive palace, using her advanced sensors to track his movements. She noticed the way he treated everyone he met, whether they were high-ranking officials or lowly workers. His kindness and patience were unlike anything she had experienced. He did not demand respect, he earned it through his actions, and yet she remained puzzled. How could someone so ordinary possess a quiet power that seemed to ripple through everyone around him? She could not measure it with technology, nor could she compare it to any strength she had known. Despite her confusion, the queen sought David's company more often. She invited him to observe her council meetings, to walk with her in the gardens, and even to share meals in the grand dining hall. Each interaction revealed more of his character. He was thoughtful, never speaking over others, yet when he did speak, his words carried a depth that caused those listening to pause and consider. He asked questions that revealed insight, empathy, and a clear understanding of people's emotions. Advisors who were usually stern and serious found themselves relaxing in his presence, sharing ideas they had kept hidden before. Even the queen's most trusted aides began to notice that David's influence extended quietly, but powerfully, shaping the mood of the palace without overt authority. One afternoon, the queen invited David to explore one of the outer wings of her palace. The corridors there were lined with glowing crystals that pulsed gently with energy, lighting the way in colors that shifted with every step. As they walked, David asked about the purpose of each room, the history of the palace, and the customs of her people. His questions were never rude or intrusive. They were asked with genuine curiosity and respect. The queen found herself answering in more detail than she had ever shared with anyone, explaining the significance of traditions, the reasoning behind protocols, and even some personal thoughts she usually kept private. David listened carefully, occasionally nodding or offering a thoughtful observation. At one point, he asked why certain decisions were made even when they caused discomfort to others. The queen paused, surprised by the simplicity yet profundity of the question. Most leaders, human or alien, would have brushed it off or provided a complex justification. But David's question made her reflect. He was not trying to challenge her authority, he was simply seeking to understand. This was a different kind of interaction, one that required her to think not just as a ruler, but as a being capable of empathy. As days went on, their bond grew, but so did the queen's frustration with her inability to fully comprehend him. She tried to use her usual methods, analyzing his behavior, observing his decisions, testing his reactions, but none of her strategies worked. David did not react according to her expectations. When faced with challenges, he remained calm, never panicking or showing fear. When others became anxious, he offered reassurance without demanding it. And when situations seemed hopeless, he found solutions that no one, not even the queen herself, could have predicted. One evening, as the twin moons rose over the alien landscape, the queen invited David to the observation deck. From there, the world stretched endlessly in shades of blue and silver, with distant mountains that glowed faintly in the moonlight. David, as always, marveled at the beauty around him. He spoke softly, sharing his thoughts about how even the most alien places could feel alive, and how understanding the world required patience and attention to detail. The queen, listening, realized that his perspective was different from any she had encountered. Humans, she had thought, were simple creatures, but David's observations revealed depth, sensitivity, and wisdom that defied her expectations. Over time, small acts of kindness from David began to make noticeable changes in the palace. Workers who were usually quiet or hesitant began to smile more, share small jokes, and offer suggestions openly. Advisors who had always relied on strict rules started to consider alternative ideas, inspired by the calm confidence and empathy David displayed. Even the Queen's own routines began to shift. She found herself pausing to reflect before making decisions, thinking not only about efficiency and logic, but also about fairness, compassion, and the impact on those around her. She could not explain it, but David's presence encouraged her to consider aspects of leadership she had never valued before. Despite the growing respect and admiration, misunderstandings occasionally arose. David's human habits sometimes puzzled the Queen. He would laugh at unexpected moments, show curiosity about objects she considered mundane, or express emotions she could not quantify. The Queen found these moments both frustrating and fascinating. She tried to predict his reactions, to anticipate his choices, but he remained unpredictable, guided by instincts she could not calculate. Yet, she began to realize that his unpredictability was part of his strength. It allowed him to respond to situations in ways that logic alone could not foresee. One day, a minor crisis occurred in the palace. A small fire had broken out in one of the supply wings, threatening to damage valuable resources. Panic spread among the staff as they tried to contain the situation. David, however, remained calm. He quickly assessed the situation, directing workers to safety, finding ways to limit the fire's spread, and offering encouragement to those who were frightened. The Queen observed silently from a distance, her sensors tracking every move. She noticed how David's presence calmed others, how his quick thinking prevented chaos, and how he acted with both courage and care. Once again, she was left in awe. She had power beyond measure, advanced technology at her disposal, yet she realized that David's influence in this moment had prevented disaster more effectively than anything she could have done. As the weeks passed, the Queen's admiration deepened, but so did her curiosity. She began to test David in small, indirect ways, not to challenge him, but to understand him better. She would create complex scenarios, pose difficult ethical questions, or introduce unusual situations to see how he would react. Each time, David responded with thoughtfulness, empathy, and ingenuity. He did not seek recognition, reward, or power. He acted from a place of honesty and concern for others. The Queen, who had once believed that strength was measured by control, technology, or intellect, began to see that David's true power was something entirely different. During one quiet evening in the palace library, David found himself alone with the Queen. The room was filled with ancient texts, some older than any living being in her kingdom. He ran his fingers over the pages, reading stories of distant worlds, long-forgotten conflicts, and the wisdom of countless generations. He spoke softly about the importance of history, learning from the past, and understanding the hearts of those around him. The Queen, listening, felt an unfamiliar warmth. She realized that human strength was not about conquest or domination. It was about understanding, empathy, and the quiet courage to act rightly even when it was difficult. Their interactions continued to deepen. David began to notice small details about the Queen that others overlooked. He saw the tension in her shoulders when she made difficult decisions, the fleeting expressions of doubt when she considered the welfare of her people, and the rare moments of vulnerability when she spoke of her fears. He never judged her or offered unsolicited advice. Instead, he listened, reflected, and offered gentle insights when asked. His presence became a source of comfort, even to the Queen, who was accustomed to commanding respect rather than receiving it. By the end of the second month, the bond between David and the Queen had grown strong, though it remained complex. The Queen admired his strength, respected his intelligence, and was fascinated by his empathy. She could not fully comprehend him, yet she felt a deep connection that went beyond curiosity or duty. David, in turn, had learned much about her world, its rules, and its wonders. He respected her position, her responsibilities, and her challenges. And though he did not fully understand her species, he approached her with openness, patience, and kindness, qualities that left a lasting impact on everyone around him. Through these weeks, the queen began to see a truth she could not deny. David's human nature, his calm confidence, his empathy, and his courage were forms of power far beyond what she had known. He did not rely on advanced technology, threats, or authority, yet he influenced those around him in ways that transformed the palace and its people. The queen realized that she had underestimated humans, that their strength was not always visible, and that some of the most profound power came from the heart. In the quiet moments before sleep, the queen would reflect on the strange and wonderful human who had entered her world. She had expected to measure him, to analyze him, and to understand him quickly, yet he remained a mystery. She admired him, not only for what he could do, but for who he was. And though she could not yet predict the full extent of his abilities, she sensed that David's presence would continue to challenge, inspire, and transform her in ways she had never imagined. Life in the alien world continued with its unique rhythm, but an unexpected challenge was. About to test everything, David had learned and revealed the depth of his true power. The peace and order of the Queen's realm had been carefully maintained for centuries, but threats from beyond the known borders were never far away. One morning, a warning arrived from the palace communications center. A rogue fleet from a distant system had entered the perimeter, challenging the Queen's authority and threatening the safety of her people. Panic quickly spread among her advisors, who rushed to prepare defenses and strategic responses. David, as always, remained calm. While others rushed to panic or make quick judgments, he observed the situation carefully, listening to the reports and watching the reactions of those around him. The Queen, standing in the center of the grand war room, gave orders with precision, but even she felt a tension she had not experienced before. Her technology and intelligence were unmatched, yet she sensed that this challenge would require more than calculations and strategies. She turned to David, silently inviting his perspective, even though she could not predict what he would say. David stepped forward, speaking clearly and confidently. He reminded everyone that panic would not solve the problem, and that focusing on the well-being of the people was as important as defending the borders. He suggested ways to organize evacuations, protect vital resources, and communicate with the civilian population to reduce fear. His ideas were simple, yet effective, and they combined logic with empathy, a balance that many of the Queen's advisors had never considered. At first, some were skeptical. How could a human with no military experience contribute meaningfully to the defense of an entire realm? But as David explained his reasoning, pointing out risks others had overlooked and offering creative solutions, their skepticism turned into quiet admiration. The Queen observed him closely. She had encountered many brilliant minds and tactical experts, but David's approach was different. He did not rely on sheer power or advanced weaponry. Instead, he relied on understanding people, their fears, their motivations, and their capabilities. He could see weaknesses not in the technology but in the hearts of those involved, and he knew how to address them. The Queen, despite her own unmatched intelligence, realized that this human possessed a type of power she could not measure or control: the ability to inspire courage, calm fear, and bring out the best in others. As the rogue fleet drew closer, David moved through the palace and the city with quiet determination. He visited the civilians, offering reassurance, answering questions, and helping them prepare safely. People who had been terrified found comfort in his presence. He never raised his voice, never forced compliance, but simply listened and guided, showing respect and care in every action. The Queen's advisors, who had always relied on protocols and fear to maintain order, began to notice a shift. Civilians were calmer, more cooperative, and more willing to follow the plans for their own protection. David's human intuition had become a force more effective than technology alone. Meanwhile, in the war room, the Queen faced her own challenge. Her sensors detected the rogue fleet's movements, and she began issuing orders to her defense teams. The battle strategies were complex, relying on precise timing and coordination, but David suggested small adjustments that none of her advisors had considered. He proposed using natural terrain features, timing maneuvers to take advantage of environmental conditions, and even leveraging psychological tactics to confuse the enemy. Each suggestion was simple but unexpected, yet when tested in simulation, they proved effective. The Queen was astonished. She had assumed her people's technology and experience were sufficient, but David's insights introduced a flexibility and creativity that technology alone could not achieve. When the fleet finally arrived, the battle began. The Queen's forces engaged, following both her orders and David's adjustments. The fight was intense, with flashes of energy and the hum of alien engines filling the sky. Many of the Queen's soldiers were skilled and disciplined, yet they faced moments of uncertainty when unexpected tactics were used. At these critical moments, David's calm presence made a difference. He moved among the ranks, quietly giving guidance, offering encouragement, and making split-second decisions that prevented errors. His understanding of fear and courage allowed him to act in ways that no machine or weapon could replicate. The Queen watched in awe as David's influence became clear. Where panic or hesitation might have caused chaos, his calm guidance inspired confidence. Where the enemy expected fear or weakness, David's strategies disrupted their plans. She realized that his power was not in strength or technology, but in his ability to understand, connect, and act with clarity. Even the Queen, who had commanded vast fleets and made decisions affecting millions, felt a new kind of respect for this human who remained steady in the face of danger. During a particularly tense moment, part of the city was at risk from an enemy strike. David rushed to the area, coordinating evacuation efforts while simultaneously communicating with defense teams to redirect attacks. He moved with determination and composure, speaking calmly to frightened citizens, organizing resources, and ensuring that no one was left behind. His actions saved countless lives, and his courage inspired those around him to act bravely as well. The Queen observed, unable to suppress a sense of awe. She had expected this challenge to test her intelligence and strategy, but David's presence had become the deciding factor. As the battle continued, the rogue fleet grew frustrated. They could not predict the human's actions, could not anticipate the morale and coordination he inspired among the defenders, and could not understand the calm confidence that guided every decision. The Queen, for the first time, saw clearly that David's power was not just personal, it was transformative. He changed those around him, strengthened them, and turned fear into courage. Her advisors, who had once doubted him, now followed his guidance willingly, and the soldiers fought with renewed determination. By the end of the battle, the rogue fleet was forced to retreat. The Queen's realm had survived without catastrophic loss, and the civilians were safe. The Queen walked through the city after the battle, observing the relief and gratitude of her people. She found David, who had been quietly assisting in the final cleanup and support efforts. Despite the intensity of the day, he looked calm and composed, speaking gently to those around him, ensuring that everyone felt safe. The Queen felt a mixture of admiration and disbelief. How could one human have such a profound effect, influencing not just the course of the battle but the hearts and minds of an entire civilization? That night, in the palace gardens, the Queen finally spoke to David in private. She acknowledged the extraordinary impact he had made, not through technology, strength, or authority, but through his courage, empathy, and clarity. David, modest as always, responded simply. He said he only did what he thought was right, that he cared for the people and wanted to help. He never boasted, never sought recognition, and never demanded gratitude. The Queen realized that his humility was part of his power. It allowed him to act without fear or ego, focusing entirely on what needed to be done. Over the following days, the Queen noticed lasting changes. The palace staff, the citizens, and even her advisors had learned something from David's example. Calmness, courage, and empathy spread throughout the realm, influencing decisions and interactions at every level. The Queen herself felt transformed. She had always relied on strategy, intelligence, and authority, but now she understood that true power also came from understanding, compassion, and the ability to inspire trust. David had revealed a kind of strength she could never measure or predict, yet it was real, and it had changed everything. As the threat subsided and life returned to normal, the Queen reflected on the events with a sense of humility and respect. She had married David, initially intrigued by his curiosity and calm nature, but now she realized that her fascination ran deeper. She could not comprehend his human essence fully, but she had witnessed it in action, in moments of crisis, and in the way he touched the hearts of all around him. David's power was subtle, quiet, and invisible to most measures, yet it was undeniable. It had shaped outcomes, saved lives, and inspired courage. David, for his part, continued to act with the same calm and quiet determination. He never sought to dominate or control. He simply observed, understood, and acted with integrity and empathy. His relationship with the Queen grew stronger, not through displays of authority or power, but through mutual respect and shared experiences. He had become not only her partner, but also her teacher in understanding the unseen strengths that existed in humanity. By the end of Part 3, it was clear to the Queen that the human she married was extraordinary in ways she had never imagined. His true power was no longer hidden. It had been revealed through action, courage, and compassion. And while she could not fully comprehend it, she respected it deeply, knowing that it had transformed not only her perception of humans, but also the world she ruled. David had become a symbol of quiet strength, a living example that true power often lies in the heart, the mind, and the courage to act rightly in moments that matter most. After the battle with the rogue fleet, the palace was quiet for the first time in weeks. The Queen moved through her halls with a thoughtful expression, reflecting on the events and the human who had changed the outcome. David's calm presence had been more powerful than any weapon, more decisive than any strategy, and more inspiring than any speech. She found herself watching him more than ever, observing the small details of his behavior that seemed so ordinary yet carried extraordinary influence. He walked among the people, spoke softly, and treated every individual with respect and care. It was impossible for her to fully measure his power, yet she knew it was real. David, meanwhile, had returned to his routine, assisting wherever needed and observing the alien world with curiosity. Though the battle had revealed much of his ability to inspire and lead, there was still more that neither he nor the Queen fully understood. His strength was not just in strategy or calmness. It was in the way he perceived the needs and emotions of those around him. He saw what others could not see, the small cracks in confidence, the hidden fears, and the untapped potential in every individual. By addressing these, he subtly transformed the environment, raising morale, strengthening bonds, and creating harmony even in moments of uncertainty. The Queen decided to test this influence further, not through danger but through understanding. She invited David to observe a council meeting that involved a complex political dispute. Two neighboring planetary systems were in conflict over resources, and the discussion was tense. Both sides were proud, stubborn, and unwilling to compromise. Her advisors had tried every conventional tactic, persuasion, logic, threats, but nothing seemed to work. David entered the room calmly, greeting each representative politely and listening carefully to their concerns. His presence alone had an immediate effect. The representatives, who had been on edge, felt themselves relaxing slightly. They did not yet trust him, but they were willing to speak more openly. David asked simple questions, questions that cut through pride and pretense. He asked about the needs of their people, the reasons for their anger, and the outcomes they truly desired. He did not take sides, nor did he offer judgment. He simply listened, acknowledged, and reflected their concerns back to them in a way they could understand. Slowly, the representatives began to consider solutions they had not imagined. Ideas that had seemed impossible became plausible, not because of technology or force, but because David's calm presence allowed reason and empathy to flourish. The Queen watched with growing admiration. She had expected her human to influence individuals through courage or charisma, but what she observed was subtler, deeper, and far more profound. His power lay in understanding, in connecting, and in inspiring trust. Where her technology and strategies had failed, David's human insight succeeded. She began to see that his influence was not limited to extraordinary situations like battle. It extended to every interaction, every decision, and every individual he encountered. Over the next few weeks, David's abilities became increasingly evident. He moved through the palace and the city, quietly guiding, assisting, and inspiring those around him. Workers followed his suggestions without hesitation. Citizens found confidence in his words, and even the Queen's most skeptical advisors began to recognize the value of his perspective. He remained humble, never seeking recognition or reward, yet his influence spread steadily and profoundly. The Queen realized that this quiet human had transformed her realm more than any army, policy, or technology ever could. One evening, David and the Queen took a walk through the palace gardens. The glowing plants and shimmering streams reflected the moonlight, creating an otherworldly beauty that David admired with genuine wonder. He spoke softly about the importance of listening, observing, and understanding the feelings of others. He explained that courage was not only about facing danger, but also about facing uncertainty, discomfort, and the unknown with honesty and integrity. The Queen listened closely, reflecting on her own experiences. She realized that, despite her immense power and intelligence, she had often underestimated the importance of empathy, understanding, and subtle influence. As they walked, the Queen began to ask deeper questions, curious about the nature of human strength. She wanted to understand how David could remain so calm, so composed, and so influential in situations that would overwhelm most beings. David answered simply, explaining that he tried to focus on what he could control, to act with integrity, and to treat others as he would like to be treated. He did not claim to possess extraordinary powers. He simply acted from a place of honesty, empathy, and courage. The Queen realized that these qualities, though ordinary in appearance, were extraordinary in effect. They created outcomes that no technology, authority, or force could replicate. A new challenge soon emerged that would further reveal David's power. A natural disaster struck one of the outer colonies of the Queen's realm, a violent storm that threatened homes, supplies, and lives. The Queen's usual systems were capable of responding, but the scale and unpredictability of the storm required more than mere technology. David immediately took action, moving to the affected areas, organizing evacuation efforts, and ensuring that people received food, water, and medical care. He worked tirelessly, not seeking recognition, but simply doing what needed to be done. The Queen observed as David interacted with the residents. He spoke to frightened children, comforted anxious parents, and coordinated volunteers to help repair damages. His presence inspired calm, courage, and cooperation. People followed his guidance willingly, not because of fear or obligation, but because they trusted him. Even the Queen, standing apart and observing, felt a deep sense of awe. She realized that his power was not something she could control or measure. It was a living force, emerging from his character, his actions, and his ability to connect with others. In the aftermath of the storm, the Queen gathered her advisors to reflect on the events. They had witnessed David's influence firsthand and could not deny its effect. Where technology and planning had limitations, his empathy, insight, and calm guidance had succeeded. The Queen spoke openly, acknowledging that human strength, as embodied by David, was a force unlike any they had encountered. Her advisors, once skeptical, began to reconsider their understanding of leadership, power, and influence. David had demonstrated that true strength often lies not in authority or force, but in the ability to inspire, to connect, and to act rightly. The following days were filled with reflection and adjustment. The Queen began to change some of her policies, integrating lessons she had learned from David. She listened more closely to her advisors and citizens, considered their concerns with greater care, and allowed empathy and understanding to guide some of her decisions. The palace atmosphere shifted. Where there had once been rigid formality and protocol, there was now a sense of trust, cooperation, and mutual respect. David's influence had spread beyond immediate actions. It had begun to shape the very culture of the realm. One night, as they watched the twin moons rise over the landscape, the Queen spoke candidly to David. She admitted that she could not fully comprehend the depth of his power, yet she recognized its effect everywhere around her. David responded simply, as he always did, saying that he only acted according to what he felt was right, and that he was grateful for the opportunity to help. The Queen realized that his humility was inseparable from his strength. His modesty allowed his power to work quietly and steadily, influencing events and people without force or domination. The realization struck her clearly. Human power was different from alien power. It was not measured in technology, intelligence, or authority, but in empathy, courage, insight, and influence. David's abilities had been revealed not through force or display, but through action, observation, and quiet guidance. He had faced challenges, inspired others, and shaped outcomes in ways that no one else could. The Queen understood that she had been fortunate to witness and share in this extraordinary human experience. As Part 4 concludes, The queen's admiration and respect for David had grown to a profound level. She saw him not only as a partner, but as a living example of a power she had never fully understood. His calm presence, empathy, courage, and humility had transformed her realm, influenced her people, and challenged her perceptions of strength. She realized that, while she ruled with authority and intelligence, the human she married possessed a type of power that was deeper, subtler, and more transformative than anything she had known. David had revealed that true power is not always visible, not always measured, but is felt in the hearts and minds of those it touches. Life in the Queen's realm had returned to a quiet rhythm, but the experiences of the past months had changed everything. The palace halls, once filled with tension and rigid formality, now carried a sense of calm and cooperation. Citizens went about their daily lives with renewed confidence. Workers moved with a quiet energy inspired by trust, and the advisors of the Queen carried out their duties with reflection and insight. At the center of these changes was David, the human who had quietly transformed not just the events of the realm, but the hearts and minds of those around him. The Queen observed him often, sometimes openly, sometimes from her chambers. She had come to admire his unwavering composure, his humility, and his ability to see the truth in situations where others saw only confusion or fear. His presence was calming, his actions deliberate yet gentle, and his mind perceptive in ways that no machine, weapon, or strategy could match. The Queen realized that David's power had grown through the challenges they had faced together, and that his true strength was now undeniable. He had faced crisis after crisis, yet he remained unchanged in character, guiding others not through authority but through empathy and understanding. A new situation arose that would finally reveal the full scope of David's power. A neighboring star system, long considered neutral, began to experience internal conflict. Disputes over resources, leadership, and cultural differences threatened to erupt into violence that could spread across the galaxy. The Queen's advisors were anxious. This was a problem far larger than any they had encountered before, involving not just military or technology, but the delicate balance of diplomacy, culture, and trust. The Queen knew that conventional strategies would not suffice. She turned to David, silently trusting that his unique perspective would illuminate a path others could not see. David studied the situation carefully. He listened to reports, reviewed historical records, and spoke with representatives from the conflicting factions. Unlike the advisors who focused on rules, threats, and punishment, David concentrated on understanding the people involved, their fears, their hopes, their frustrations, and their desires for a better future. He approached every conversation with patience, asking questions that encouraged honesty and reflection. He did not try to dominate or persuade forcefully. He sought understanding first, believing that meaningful solutions could only come from clarity and trust. Over time, David's approach began to bear fruit. Leaders who had been suspicious and stubborn started to respond to his calm presence. He helped them articulate their concerns and their goals, reflecting them back in ways that encouraged compromise and cooperation. He mediated discussions, suggested fair exchanges, and encouraged empathy among the conflicting parties. The Queen watched in awe as he navigated a web of tension and hostility with a grace and effectiveness that surpassed anything she had imagined. Where technology and authority had limited reach, David's human insight created solutions that were not only practical but lasting. In the midst of this process, David faced a personal challenge that would further reveal his character. One of the factions accused him of bias, questioning his loyalty and motives. Instead of reacting defensively, David remained calm. He listened carefully to their concerns, acknowledged their fears without judgment, and explained his intentions with honesty. His words were simple, yet they carried clarity and sincerity that disarmed the most suspicious leaders. Over time, even the harshest critics began to trust him, realizing that his only goal was the well-being of all involved. It was a moment that demonstrated not only his wisdom, but also his courage, the courage to face doubt and suspicion without losing composure or integrity. As the negotiations progressed, the Queen began to notice changes not only in the leaders, but also in her own perception. She had always relied on authority, intelligence, and strategy to guide her realm, yet David's methods demonstrated a different kind of leadership. By listening, understanding, and inspiring trust, he achieved results that no display of force or knowledge alone could have produced. She realized that human strength was subtle, transformative, and often invisible to those who measured power in conventional ways. David had taught her that leadership was not just about control. It was about connection, empathy, and the courage to act rightly in complex situations. One evening, after a particularly successful series of negotiations, David and the Queen walked together through the palace gardens. The twin moons reflected in the streams, casting shimmering light across the glowing flora. The air was calm, filled with the soft hum of energy that kept the plants alive and vibrant. The Queen spoke quietly, acknowledging the impact David had made on her realm, on her people, and on her own understanding of leadership and strength. She admitted that she could not fully comprehend the depth of his power, yet she respected and admired it profoundly. David smiled softly, as he always did, and said that he had only tried to do what was right and fair. He never sought praise, recognition, or authority. His power was not about dominating others, but about acting with honesty, empathy, and courage. The Queen realized that this modesty was inseparable from his strength. It allowed him to act freely, without fear of judgment or desire for reward, and it made his influence lasting and profound. She saw clearly that the true power of a human lay not in technology, strength, or intellect alone, but in character, the ability to touch hearts, guide minds, and inspire courage. The following weeks saw the resolution of the interstellar conflict. The factions reached agreements that ensured fairness and cooperation, largely guided by David's interventions. Where previous generations of leaders had failed, he had succeeded not through force, but through patience, understanding, and empathy. The Queen observed the celebrations, the relief of the citizens, and the gratitude of those who had once been in conflict. She felt a deep sense of pride and awe, not for the technology of her realm or her own intelligence, but for the extraordinary human who had quietly shaped this outcome. In the aftermath, the Queen decided to honor David in a way that transcended ceremony or recognition. She invited him to participate in a council of wisdom, not as a visitor or diplomat, but as a partner whose insights would guide decisions for the betterment of the realm. David accepted, not out of desire for status, but out of commitment to serve and help. His presence in the council brought a balance of logic, empathy, and moral clarity. He listened carefully, offered thoughtful suggestions, and encouraged others to consider perspectives they had previously overlooked. Slowly, the culture of the council and the palace shifted toward collaboration, understanding, and mutual respect. As months passed, the Queen saw further evidence of David's unique power. He continued to move among the people, offering guidance, comfort, and wisdom in simple yet profound ways. Children learned from his patience, workers gained confidence in their abilities, and leaders began to value empathy and integrity as much as skill and authority. David's influence extended quietly but powerfully, shaping a culture that valued understanding and courage over fear or dominance. The Queen, observing these changes, recognized that he had revealed a universal truth, that true power is not always measured by what is visible, but by the positive impact it has on others. One evening, standing together on the observation deck overlooking the alien landscape, the Queen spoke candidly. She told David that she had married him not only because of curiosity or admiration, but because he had shown her a new understanding of life, leadership, and strength. She admitted that she could not fully comprehend his essence, but she recognized the transformative effect he had on her realm and on herself. David, in his humble way, replied that he had only tried to do what was right, and that he was grateful for the opportunity to help. The Queen realized that this human's power was complete in its simplicity. He did not rely on force, threats, or authority. He acted with clarity, empathy, and courage, touching hearts and minds, transforming outcomes, and inspiring trust. She understood that she had been fortunate to witness this power firsthand, not as a display of might, but as a living example of what it meant to act rightly, to understand others, and to lead with both heart and mind. In the weeks that followed, the realm flourished in ways the Queen had never imagined. Citizens lived with greater confidence and cooperation. The palace staff carried out their duties with renewed purpose and insight. The advisors embraced empathy and understanding as part of their decision-making. And through it all, David remained at the center, quietly guiding, supporting, and inspiring. His influence was invisible to some, obvious to others, but undeniable in its effect. As the story reached its conclusion, the queen reflected on what she had learned. She had expected to marry a human she could observe and perhaps understand, but she had discovered a being whose strength transcended expectation. David had revealed that power is not always physical, technological, or intellectual. It can be quiet, humble, and subtle, yet profoundly transformative. Through courage, empathy, integrity, and understanding, he had changed the lives of countless individuals, shaped the culture of a civilization, and earned the lasting respect of a queen who could not fully comprehend him. David, as always, continued his quiet work. He helped, guided, and inspired, never seeking recognition or reward. His actions reflected his character, and his character reflected the highest form of human strength. The queen admired him, respected him, and learned from him, understanding that their bond was not only personal but transformative in a broader sense. Together, they had faced challenges, solved crises, and revealed truths about leadership, courage, and power that neither could have imagined alone. By the end of the story, it was clear to all that David's true power had been revealed. It was not in flashy displays or dominance, but in his ability to connect with others, inspire courage, act with integrity, and guide outcomes with empathy and wisdom. The queen, once unable to comprehend human strength, now understood that true power could be quiet, subtle, and invisible, yet capable of transforming lives and civilizations. David had shown her, and the universe, what it meant to wield real power, the power of the human heart, mind, and spirit. The queen looked at David one final time as the twin moons reflected over the shimmering city. She felt awe, admiration, and deep respect. He had revealed his true power, not through force or authority, but through action, character, and courage. And in doing so, he had changed her, his realm, and the universe in ways that would endure far beyond any battle or ceremony. David, the human, had truly shown what it meant to be extraordinary, and in his quiet way, had left an impact that would never be forgotten.